Hey folks, so this book that you see in the background is a really old book. I don't know if you can't see it because can you see it? Yeah, it's a really old book. This book was published, let's see here, in 1956. And one of the things that I find really interesting about this book is the way that the illustrations depict people of different skin colors. Nobody in this book is white. Nobody in this book is black. People have all different shades of brown and peach and olive. I don't know if you can see. One of the things that I like about this book, well, first of all, I had this book growing up. It's very beat up, as you can see. It was published in 1956, and it's a giant golden book, deluxe edition, with cardboard binding, and it's been taped a lot. It's really old. I taught myself how to read, reading this book, The Iliad and the Odyssey. And why this is so significant to me is because this was my initial what's the word I'm looking for? Introduction to the idea that there are multiple skin colors. So, obviously, I have very light skin. My father also has very light skin, so does my mother. We are primarily European of descent, and my family emigrated here from my father's side in the early 1900s. From my mother's side, probably a good 100 years before that. They're Okies for a while. And I don't know a lot of the heritage. My mom was a hippie, and she tried to teach me equality, right? I didn't understand about systemic racism until I was an adult and started learning about it, because it's not taught in public schools. So I honestly believed that I wasn't racist. I wouldn't say that I am now. However, to say that I don't benefit from a racist system, I think would be an uneducated statement. What I learned in the last 10 years is I didn't know that I don't know that my mother raised me colorblind. Actually, she liked to study different ethnic backgrounds, different mythologies, histories from different parts of the world, cultures, and celebrate them and their differences and how beautiful they were. So that practice was taught to me from an early age. However, when it comes to identifying as an American, in that regard, I think I was taught to be colorblind. Because if you sounded like an American and you were here, I just assumed you were an American, and we're all the same. We're all just here, and this is who we are. This is our country, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is. We all live here. And the idea of the melting pot that was so promoted to immigrants in this country was really kind of, I don't know what the words I'm looking for. I adopted that. It was incorporated into my understanding of the culture I was being raised in. Now, when we went out in public, I saw people with different color skin. I saw that it was a different color. I think to some extent my parents did succeed in raising me a bit colorblind because I didn't see them as any different. But if you had a different skin color and you were from another country, I saw you as different. So there were gaps. And I know that my parents' intentions were good because they've always had friends of all different backgrounds, and they celebrate those differences and appreciate them. And my father raised me that a person of true culture should educate themselves about lots of different types of cultures, learn about the different types of food, learn about the cultures where those foods come from, learn about the different practices, respect the differences, and appreciate them. But when it came to America, I still managed to somehow get that colorblind programming, despite my parents' best intentions of making sure that I didn't grow up to be a bigot. I think I succeeded in not growing up to be a bigot, and there's always more to learn. And so I've worked on self-educating myself and reading a lot of books on history to fill in the gaps, because public education didn't give us an adequate education about our history. Anyway, the reason why this book is so interesting to me, though, is because, and I go back to it now, I'm really thankful I still have this book that I learned how to read with. I turned 48 next week, in about a week or so, and I don't have a lot of things from my childhood, and I have this. So, anyway, one of the things that I like about this book is the characters that, can I do it? Make it show properly? I don't know if I can. They don't make the bad guys dark and the good guys light. They don't make the good guys dark and the bad guys white. They show diversity in every page. There's all different skin tones. And it's never discussed as part of the story. It's just included in the pictures. The story is the story. So, the land of the lotus eaters. From Ilium, as Troy is sometimes called, the wind carried Odysseus, his 12 stout ships, and their crews to Ismarus. There, being a warrior of that time, he thought it only right to plunder the town and kill the men. The women and cattle and goods he saved and divided among his men. Then wise Odysseus warned his men to pick up their heels and be off, but they in their foolishness would not obey. They loitered on the beach beside the great fires, feasting and drinking wine, until the men from the neighboring towns came down, and in the great battle that followed, several men from each ship were killed. From that shore the rest sailed away, sick at heart, but their troubles had only begun. Zeus, the cloud-gatherer, called upon the north wind, and he set a terrible tempest against the ships, covering land and sea with clouds. Then night came rushing down from the sky. In the blackness the ships plunged along, their sails ripped to shreds by the wind. When they had recovered from the gale, Ithaca was not far off, but the sea and the current and the northwest wind caught the ships as they doubled Cape Malea and drove them adrift past Cythera. When they reached land again, after being beaten about by bitter winds for 9 days, they were in the country of the lotus eaters. These people proved to be friendly enough. They offered Odysseus' men some of their food, but alas, whoever tasted the honey's sweetness thought no more of his ships or his home. He wanted only to stay with the lotus eaters, idly feeding with them on the luscious fruit. Odysseus had to tie his men and drag them back to the ships by force, while they wept and protested all the way, and before any could taste of the lotus, he had them bending to their oars and the ships went scudding across the gray sea. Again, this, I don't know if you can see it. The pictures. I just love it. You know what? I wonder if I can change this background so you can actually see. The nice thing about I really love the illustrations. It's like they made paper cutouts and made the illustrations that way. But they don't make the bad guys one color or the good guys another color. It's all mixed up. And this is how I was taught about people. About people of different skin colors. I was taught that there's all different colors. And that's just the way it is. I wish more people could act like that. You know, it's funny, the Iliad and the Odyssey, I used to have talks with my kids about the Iliad and the Odyssey, the way the stories were passed down and collected and eventually put together by Homer. They were stories that bards had been telling, all these little independent stories that bards had been telling for years, and they'd been passed down for who knows how long, until someone decided to put them all together and compile them into one story. And the ironic thing about that is that that's how the Bible was made too. Oh, there's a cat in the background. You see that cat? Jim. Say hi, Jim. That's Jim. Anyway, my kids and I used to talk about how interesting it would be that we could have just as likely formed an entire religion around the Iliad and the Odyssey. Anyway, I just found it really interesting. This was the book that I learned how to read with, and pictures by Alice and Martin Provenson. And the other thing that I find really interesting about this is that it was published in 1956, and this is the 50s, right? So wouldn't they be like making all the bad guys brown and all the black and all the good guys white? But they didn't. They include a wide array of diversity, not just in skin tone, but in the clothes that the different people wore. It was a really great example as a kid. Can I make it show up? I'm trying to. Yeah, it's not. I gotta fix that. That doesn't work very well. But anyway, I just wanted to share. I found that book on my shelf, and it made me think about, because I was having a conversation on somebody else's live the other day about nationality and skin tone and black and white, and he's like, why do you say you're white? And I'm like, well, because I'm not. I mean, look at me. What am I supposed to say I am? And he's like, yeah, but... And then he put a background up that was just white. And I was like, yeah, I'm not that color. And then he put a background up that was just black. And he said, and I'm not that color either. Which is real. It's totally real. I don't like this whole black and white term. The American-made racism. And if we make something, we can... And it's bad, we can replace it with something that's good, right? I mean, if this scares me when the schools or the legislatures are trying to control what we teach the kids because they They want to whitewash everything. I'm really glad I got to learn about all these different cultures with depictions that were more realistic and didn't make everything black and white. It had a really positive impact on me as a kid. If we take away those things, what are we teaching our kids? I don't know. Anyway, this is a really cool book. See if you can find it online in better condition than mine. Check it out. I think you'll really like it. It's really neat for early readers because it's a kid's version of the Iliad and the Odyssey, of course. It is dumbed down a little, so it's easier for an early reader to be able to get it. But there are big words that they have to sound out. The illustration is just so neat. And they made the shapes similar to the way that you find people and animals depicted on like Grecian urns and stuff, which is even cool, in itself. But let's see. The fearful giants. For 6 days and nights, Odysseus and his men were blown out. On the 7th day, they at last sailed into a fine harbor with a narrow mouth between two headlands. They moored all their ships side by side in calm waters, all but the ship of Odysseus, which was anchored outside just beyond the point. Odysseus climbed the cliff nearby for a view of the land. He could see neither field nor garden, but only the smoke of fires. So he sent 3 picked men down the road to see what kind of people lived there. The men followed a wide road and level enough for carts, and as they were coming near the town, they met a giant of a girl who had come to draw water from a clear spring. They asked her who the king might be, and she led them to her father's high-roofed hall. There a terrible welcome awaited them, for her father at once snatched up one of the men and used him for his supper. The other 2 raced back to their ships, but from every direction fearful giants came, showering stones which smashed the ships and spearing the men like fish. Only Odysseus's ship, moored outside the harbor, escaped this dreadful fate. For Odysseus, seeing the horror from the cliff, slashed the ship's mooring. He ordered his men to the oars, and they sped away from those towering cliffs, 1 shipload left of 12. You know, it's interesting that I love the illustrations. It's really interesting. There's a lot that you could get out of that. I really enjoyed studying this story in college as well. Of course, I used a different version of it. Very strange. Anyway, I'm going to let you guys go. This hasn't been my best live, but I wanted to share the book because I like it, and I thought you might too. So anyway, y'all have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.